The Joe Rogan Experience.
What I find more interesting is what's happening now with the government study that started here at Skinwalker Ranch, AUSA, the one that was in the New York Times, and where the information is going now. These are new times. Things are starting to drop to the public.
And what is starting to drop?
Well, so the Skinwalker story, lack of physical evidence though there may be, comes to the attention of the Defense Intelligence Agency. This guy, this scientist who sees it, he goes to Bigelow, they go visit the property, he looks around, he has an experience. He's not there 15 or 20 minutes and something appears inside a house that only he can see. He doesn't say anything about it. He goes back to Washington, meets with Harry Reid in a skiff in the Capitol and 2 other U.S. senators. He presents them the proposal for a study of UFOs and related phenomena, not just like ATIP, looking at flying saucers that encounter U.S. military, but something more expansive. They put out a contract. Bigelow bids on it, creates an organization called BASS, again, puts together a team of experts, 50 or 60 employees, and they start studying it. They go around the world. They interact with other governments. They get their files. They send out teams to hotspots to try to figure it out, looking at whether there are connections between what we'd call flying saucers, possible aliens, and all these other different phenomena. The program goes on for a couple of years, and somebody yanks the funding. And get this, the reason that the DIA suddenly became worried about all this weirdness that was being reported at Skinwalker and elsewhere is because they thought it was demonic. And they thought, if this comes out that we're studying this weird phenomena, A, it's going to end up on the front page of the New York Times, which it did, and B, we might be invoking Satan in here. These were fundamentalist Christians in the Pentagon who pulled the money because they thought it was the devil. I'm not making that up.
That's hilarious.
And the program it now continues. They keep reporting that it's stopped. It hasn't stopped. The U.S. military has been studying UFOs since the beginning in every branch of our military. They continue to do so. And now every time they get caught in a lie, so it is continuing. Tell them about it.
It is continuing. So ALSAP's money was taken away, but the ATIP program, which was what Lou Elizondo headed up, that looked just at military UFO encounters, continued. Pentagon says it was ended. It did not. It continued for a couple of years, and after the New York Times story comes out and creates this furor, it got funding, and it now has a structured organization, and it is looking into cases where the U.S. military sees these things. And off the coast of Virginia, they've been seeing this stuff. I think Fravor talked about it when he was here, these beach balls with cubes inside of them. And they were sitting there for hours off the coast, right where our warplanes would go out for training exercises, as if they wanted to be seen. And it went on. There were 70 or 80 witnesses during 2015, 2016, pilots. Some of them were willing to talk about it, some weren't. It continues to this day. Now the program is on more solid footing. Now Congress has been informed, and they want to expand it and get more information. We are told the New York Times is working on another follow-up story to look into reports of what Lazar said, crash retrievals, reverse engineering, the existence of these metamaterials, bits and pieces that Grandpa had stashed in a barn somewhere, whether it's Roswell or other alleged crashes. They're taking it seriously to figure out if there's something about these materials that we could not have created. So the BASS program, the AUSA program, created a baseline of what we know about the state of our technology right now in different disciplines. Lift and propulsion, things of that sort. They commissioned 38 papers that would be the baseline for what the state of human knowledge was in 2009, and those papers were published on an internal Department of Defense website, but they've never been made public. 6 of them have now leaked out, and I brought along 2 more for you that have not been made public.
So these are like scientific reports based on the government study of UFOs. Okay, so they commissioned these papers. Only a handful have been released to the public. George happens to have a couple more.
So you're going to be the first person outside of the program other than me to see it.
What does it say?
They're called a DIRD. This is a Defense Intelligence Reference Document. This paper is on metamaterials. So how you could engineer existing Earth materials where you could duplicate what you're seeing up there. None of these papers, 2 of them actually, mention aliens or UFOs. They're strictly on what the state of our knowledge is or was as of 2009.
And they reference aliens and UFOs?
Only 2 of the papers do.
And how do they reference them?
Well, there's one of the papers that looks at the physical effects of people that come into contact with these unknown craft. And it's sort of like the effects of radiation or microwaves. There are physical effects, hundreds of cases that have been investigated, and that's what that paper looks at. And that's already out there.
Yeah, the harm that is done to the body, what they call close proximity to a UAP, which is a UFO. There are known effects to the human body that are horrible, and there was a study that focused on the witnesses they do know had close encounters, like military people, and then how it negatively impacted their body. So each of these reports, as he obtains them or as people find them, they're very illuminating to what our government knows.
There was one that looked at how you would track a hypersonic vehicle traveling through space. How difficult would it be? Now, it doesn't say UFOs, but it's looking at things that really travel fast that are coming in from space into our atmosphere. How would you track that? Now, when that paper was written in 2009, we didn't have hypersonic weapons. Now, the Russians claim they've got them. And now it's very timely because we're in a rush to develop those things. So that was one of the papers that I made public last year, and I interviewed the engineering professor who wrote it. He wasn't writing about UFOs. He was writing about the state of knowledge about hypersonic weapon systems back then. It's a similar thing for metamaterials. That's what this paper is how would you engineer materials so you could travel through space that would have, say you shoot it with microwaves, and it could develop certain special properties.
And
so
just to put into context maybe, because, here's the deal. Our government has now admitted there are UFOs. That's the world we're living in. They're unidentified objects or craft that seem to outmaneuver, actively jam our radar systems, even go over our military installations of high sensitivity. There are incursions. All of this is now said. It's a different world we're living in. However, the next thing that people are talking about now is, well, we also have materials. We'll call them metamaterials. Materials associated with UFO craft. They might even go as far as to say we have whole materials, craft, from somewhere else.
So when they're saying we have materials associated from crafts, are they saying that they have a crash?
Yes.
Yes.
Hal Puthoff, who was a physicist who worked with Bigelow on both NIDS and BASS, made a presentation in Las Vegas in June of 2018 where he says, yeah, we've got these materials and we're trying to figure out where they came from and how they were engineered, because some of them appear to be multi-layered that are beyond what is known engineering capabilities of humans. It looks like they would have had to have been made in, say, zero gravity of space, and we don't have any manufacturing plants up there. He implied that they came from crashes. Doesn't mean it's a UFO from Zeta Reticuli. It's crashed from somewhere, and we don't know whose it is. So they're trying to figure out whether we can duplicate it or not. And they got a bunch of samples. And are
Have you seen any of this stuff?
No, I haven't seen it. Bigelow and Hal have.
Have you?
Seen?
I've seen what people claim. So the Army now has these metamaterials that were famously put in through the Coast to Coast show.
Right.
It was called Arts Parts. I told you this last time. I was able to obtain them briefly and have 5 scientists from New Mexico that I knew, material scientists, physicists, interrogate, as they say, the samples for numerous days. I don't believe that I had access to the best equipment. We didn't find anything extraordinary. Other people have. So right now the Army has...
So, but when you say you didn't find anything extraordinary, did you find anything ordinary?
No, they weren't ordinary.
These are the materials here?
That's the one of the exact pieces that I had in my hands and worked on with my team, and I filmed it all. But right now, because of TTSA, they've made a deal with the Army, and I think the Army has these parts. But I feel like we're missing the big note here. The big note is, a few years ago, UFOs are still laughable. The military doesn't look after that. Turns out we have programs that do. I'm suspecting, and maybe you can talk more about it, that the next piece of information is that there are reverse engineering programs, which will then make everybody have to look at Lazar's story a little bit differently once again. If we admit that we are trying to reverse engineer either materials or actual craft from somewhere else, intelligently designed metals or craft from somewhere else, if there are crash retrieval programs for vehicles we don't know where they're from, that's going to make me look at Bob's story even more differently.
Right, but isn't that a big if? I mean, if they've...
It's an interesting time.
It is, but I mean, there's no indication that they're willing to discuss some retrieved craft, right?
Yeah, I
Is
think
there?
that's a heavy lift. So supposedly the New York Times is working on that story. I think it'd be pretty hard for
More
them
than supposedly, they are.
Yeah, they are. They've been asking people about this stuff, but I mean, to get that into print, to get it past their editors, that's a hard deal, hard
Alleged
sell.
extraterrestrial material from the bottom of a wedge-shaped craft in the late 1940s made of 26 alternating layers, 1 to 4 microns dark bismuth. Is that how you say that?
Bismuth.
Bismuth. And 100 to 200 microns of silver, magnesium, zinc alloy. Each of the 6 pieces received from the U.S. Army source were formed with a curvature that tapered.
So basically, they're saying there's no process that we know of that would create this alloy layered in that type of layer system. I actually have a piece out about this.
Isn't that kind of how they did samurai swords?
Ooh, that's cool. The
Yeah,
folding in the middle.
I'm not sure that this is alien of any kind, but it is of unknown origin. And
Well, Jacques Vallée has like 20, as I said last, Jacques fucking Vallée, he's got like 27 samples of things associated with crash retrieval. So if anybody has an archive of this stuff that's being scientifically interrogated right now, and his studies do show isotopic ratios that are not from this earth, so he's confident with his research. My big point,
He's confident with his research of what?
well, you should talk with Jacques, but he...
Right, but what is he confident of that you can say
that he has alloys that came from UFO crashes or runoff.
Has anybody independently analyzed those things?
Yeah,
and
he's
agreed
got a
with
whole.
him?
yeah, he's got a presentation, he says.
Yeah,
that-
whole teams of people.
Well, how come this isn't like public knowledge? Why isn't this in the New York Times?
You got to talk with Jacques, whether you have him as a guest or not. You should talk with him.
How old is Jacques now?
He's getting up there because
He's in his 80s,
Yeah.
I think. Here's
I would probably have to go to him, right, with a hazmat
Oh, he's
suit
in
on.
no,
good
he's
shape.
a
Where's
strong
he at?
dude. He's a strong dude.
Where is he
San Francisco.
specifically? No.
Yeah. What's the address? Yeah.
Here's the thing. This program is ongoing. It doesn't have to find aliens. There are legitimate national security reasons to be looking at who's flying these craft. These
Right.
things are still being seen over our military installations, and our Pentagon wants to know who's flying them. And that's a perfectly legitimate inquiry, regardless of little green men. No one wants to say there at the Pentagon that we're investigating UFOs and aliens. They're just investigating where did these things come from? Are they a threat? Can we duplicate that technology? If the Russians or the Chinese get this stuff before we do, if they can do what the Tic Tac did, it's a game changer. So they want to know whose it is and how we can duplicate it. And that is a perfectly legitimate inquiry whether there are aliens or not.